Welcome, everyone. We are at the top of the hour. I just want to give everyone a moment to log in, get settled in, grab a piece of paper, grab a coffee, grab a tea, whatever it may be, but we'll get started in just a minute. All right, for those of you just joining us, thank you. So glad you're here. We will get started in just another minute. Again, just want to give everyone a chance to get settled before we get started. And I just turned on the chat feature, so we do really want this webinar to be engaging. We've got the chat feature turned on, we have the Q&A turned on, so please feel free to engage with us in the chat and your fellow students and alumni today as well. Right. Thank you everyone for joining us. We'll give it just like 30 more seconds. All right, we're 2 minutes past the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Rebecca Davis, and I am the Career Services Manager here at UAGC, and I will be your host for today's webinar. We are so glad you're here. We're thrilled to have you, our students and alumni, joining us. So, whether you're actively interviewing for a new role, exploring a career change, preparing for a promotion, or simply planning ahead for future opportunities, you are definitely in the right place. So, no matter where you are in your journey, we're glad you're here today. Before we jump in, let me quickly go over a few housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded. I know that's a popular question, so we are being recorded, and everyone who registered will receive a copy of this recording by email in the next few days. We will be answering as many questions as possible during and at the end of today's presentation. So please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions anonymously, or you can add your name. If we don't get to your question live, feel free to email us at careerservices@uagc.edu, and we'll drop that email in the chat and we'll follow up with you to answer your question. Like I said, we do encourage chat throughout this presentation. Just make sure you select everyone when typing so the full group can see your message. And then we do have members of the Career Services team available in the chat to help answer any questions as well. And then finally, if you experience any technical difficulties, try logging out of Zoom and then back in, which usually resolves the issue. All right, now on to today's topic, interviewing. We're focusing on helping you feel confident and prepared for your next interview. So I will be talking with two of our amazing career advisors who will share their expert advice on interview questions, interview style, techniques, and strategies, along with their personal insights from years of coaching students and professionals. So we'll start with a series of questions we hear all the time, and then we'll add questions submitted by our students in the Hope and Hustle community on our UAGC Connect platform. After that, we'll open it up for live Q&A, so you can ask anything that's on your mind through that Q&A button, whether it's how to prepare, how to answer specific questions, or how to bring your best self to an interview. So without further ado, let's get started. I'd like to begin by introducing our two advisors and inviting them to share a little bit about themselves before we dive in. Let's start with you, Nicole.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Hello, everybody. We are so excited to be here today to geek out with you on all things interviewing. So, like Rebecca said, my name is Nicole. I'm one of the career advisors here at UAGC. I've been with the university now for a little over 4 years, and I support several programs, including business administration, healthcare administration, and more. And I really help students with resume development, interview preparation, networking, and overall career readiness. I bring over 9 years of experience in career services and recruiting. And so I I understand the hiring process from both the candidate and the employer sides. I hold a bachelor's in journalism public relations from Creighton University and a master's in higher education from UAGC, as well as a career coaching intensive certification from the National Association of Colleges and Employers. And I'm so excited to be here today to walk you through interview press practices and share strategies to really help you to showcase your strengths and how to stand out in the hiring process. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to my amazing colleague, Desiree.
Thank you, Nicole. My name is Desiree. Hi, everyone. And like Nicole, I am also a career advisor. I've been at UAGC for, oh gosh, I think it's going on 10 years now. But I support students in our education and behavioral science programs. And I'm also a certified global career development facilitator. And I just love supporting students through each phase of the career development process. I think interviewing is a particularly fun topic, so I'm super excited for today's conversation and excited to answer everybody's questions.
Awesome. We're also lucky to hear from both of you today. So let's go ahead and dive into the first question, and we'll start with Nicole. What are some ways to research a company effectively before an interview? And we gave you a tip. You must research in advance.
Absolutely. So I am going to piggyback off that research. So this is definitely a question I hear a lot from students, especially in our coaching calls, especially when they're in the thick of job searching. So when you're preparing for an interview, thorough company research really helps you to show genuine interest, tailor your responses, and then confirm that the organization really aligns with your goals and values. So I typically encourage students to start by exploring the company's website. Check out the About Us sections, mission, values, leadership, and the news sections to really understand its culture and recent achievements. And then it never hurts to also just to go and review the company's LinkedIn profile, their social media pages. A big one that I'm always telling students to do is to go to the Handshake employer page for insights from employees, job postings, and students or alumni feedback. And then finally, you want to supplement your research with industry articles or annual reports to kind of learn a little bit about the company's reputation, maybe who are their competitors and any kind of upcoming initiatives that they might have. Equally important, and I say this all the time, is researching yourself. So reflect on your career story, your career trajectory, your values, your professional brand, and then review your resume and identify the skills and accomplishments that really best align with the position and the company mission. You want to prepare specific examples or stories of your transferable skills in action, and then consider your long-term goals so you can clearly explain why this organization is a strong fit for you. I always also say this as well. You are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. So by really understanding both the employer and yourself, you'll communicate an authentic, compelling narrative that really shows not only what you can do, but why you're the right fit for their team and why it's a good fit for you as well.
Excellent. That is such a key that will help you stand out in an interview. Thank you, Nicole. Next question is for Desiree. What should we wear to an interview, and how can we make sure we're dressed appropriately for that company or that industry?
Yeah, I love this question because your outfit really is a part of that first impression, but it absolutely does not need to be something stressful. So I always encourage job seekers to think of their interview outfit as a way to communicate professionalism, respect for the opportunity, and then also confidence in themselves, right? So a simple guideline that I use is to dress one step above what employees normally wear. So if the workplace is typically business casual, maybe choose something more polished like a blazer or a tailored top. Maybe it's a really relaxed environment in like a tech or creative industry. And in those cases, you still want to opt for clean, well-fitting clothing and still show that you put a lot of thought and effort into your appearance. And I think that research can help a lot here. So take a look at the company's About page, maybe their team photos on LinkedIn or any videos that they've shared, and you'll get a pretty clear sense of whether the culture leans more formal or more casual. And that can kind of help you guide your choices. I think I also want to point out that virtual interviews require the same level of professionalism. And yes, it's important to even dress fully head to toe, not just the top half, right? Because that can help you put you in the mindset of showing up as your most professional self, even if you're at home on the computer. And then another last tip that I love to share is testing your outfit ahead of time, right? Sit down in it, stand up in it, check the neckline if it's on camera or virtual, and just make sure the colors look good on screen. These little details can help you avoid distractions during the interview, so that way all your energy goes into the conversation. And I think overall that honestly the most important piece of this is just wearing something you feel good in, right? If you're comfortable, your confidence comes through, and that matters much more than the exact style of blazer that you decide to wear.
So true. And thank you so much for throwing in that tip about virtual as well. Nicole, what's the most effective way to answer probably the number one interview question? Tell me about yourself.
It is absolutely the most anticipated interview question. And this is the one that I really talk a lot about with a lot of my students on my coaching calls. So I would say really the most effective way to answer the tell me about yourself question is kind of focusing on giving a concise 1 to 2 minute professional summary that really connects your background to the role that you're interviewing for. So you want to kind of think of it as your own personal elevator pitch. So it's a brief story of who you are, what you've done, and then where you're headed. So a good rule of thumb with the tell me about yourself question is to think of answering it with the equation of present, past, future. So start with the present. So you want to introduce yourself, your name, major, degree, or your current role or year in school. So for example, you could say, my name's Nicole and I'm a senior studying business administration here at UAGC, and I'm currently interning at the marketing department at American Express. Then from the present, you want to move into the past. So that's where you're going to summarize your most relevant experiences, jobs, internships, volunteer work, any key accomplishments that you have, and then highlight those 3 to 5 transferable skills and illustrate them with short results-oriented examples. So you might say something like, I strengthened my leadership skills while managing a team project that increased client satisfaction by 20%. You want to highlight key strengths. So emphasize those qualities that really align with the role. Could be things like communication, problem solving, leadership, any kind of technical expertise that you have, and then use examples to show measurable impact, those stories that we were talking about as well. And then finally, you're going to want to conclude with that future. So wrap up by sharing your career goals and why this specific role really excites you. Show that enthusiasm. Connect your background and skills to the company's mission. So you could say something like, I'm eager to apply my marketing and analytical skills in a dynamic team environment, and I'm especially drawn to this role because of its focus on innovative digital campaigns. Couple additional tips with this very, very common interview question is practice, don't memorize. So keep it natural and conversational. Tailor your elevator pitch. Adjust your response for each company and the role that you're interviewing for. Stay concise, keep it to 1 to 2 minutes. And then last but not least, show your personality. Let that genuine enthusiasm really come through. So you're using that present, past, future format. This just helps you to ensure your answer is focused, it's professional, and it's also engaging. And it also helps to set a confident tone for the rest of your interview.
I love a good formula, present, past, future. That really will stick with us to remember. Thank you. Desiree, how can we best prepare for interview questions that start with, tell me about a time when?
That is such a great question because these types of interview questions come up a lot. And so these ones are called behavioral interview questions. And the whole purpose is to help employers understand how you've handled these real situations in the past, because that's one of the strongest predictors of how you'll handle a similar situation in the future. And so, Rebecca, you said you love a formula, so I've got one for you. My favorite tool for answering these is the STAR method. So this will help you stay organized and clear. And so we're going to break it down for you, but STAR stands for situation, right? What was going on? Set the scene. You want to tell them a story. So this is you kind of creating that context. Then T is for task. So in that situation, what was the goal, the challenge, or the problem that you needed to address? Then A is for action. So what did you do? And you want to walk through the specific steps that you took. And then lastly, you always want to end on the result, right? How did things turn out because of your actions? If you can include things like impact or data, even better. And so what I really recommend doing is preparing a few strong stories in advance. Maybe it's a time you solved a problem or supported a customer or learned something new. Could be navigating a conflict or improving a process. You want to think of these stories as tools in a toolbox. Once you have them ready, then it becomes easy to pull them out and adapt them to a variety of different situations. And the more that you practice telling these stories using that STAR method, the easier it becomes to apply them on the spot. And to make this easier for you, we are sharing a STAR method worksheet in the chat. And this worksheet walks you through common situations that employers ask about across many industries. And it gives you space to break down each one into situation, task, action, and result. So I really encourage everyone to spend some time filling it out, especially if you feel a little bit intimidated by behavioral questions and being able to come up with these examples on the spot. The more that you work through these stories ahead of time, the more confident and prepared you'll feel, and the more ready your toolbox will be when it's time for that actual in-person interview.
Awesome. I love it. And as someone who's interviewed quite a few people, what really sticks in my brain as the interviewer is their stories. That's what you
Mhm.
remember. And so it really helps people stand out. And like Desiree said, that link to the STAR method resource has been dropped in the chat. We will also include it in the email with a copy of this recording as well. Nicole, next question. How can we highlight transferable skills when changing industries or roles?
I love this question, especially for the students that we work with here at UAGC. We work with a lot of career changers, career pivoters. I
Mhm.
happened to glance in the Q&A as well, and there's a couple folks asking, I haven't been working for 10 years. So hopefully this will kind of give you some insight as well. Because when changing, industry or roles, interviews are really your chance to show how your skills translate, regardless of your background. So focusing on those transferable skills, those skills like leadership, communication, project management, problem solving, teamwork, and client or customer relationship management. Those are the skills you're going to want to hone in on. And you really want to start by identifying what the new role values from the job description. Then what you do is you match those needs to your own experience. So translate your past work into results and impact, not industry specific tasks. So for example, instead of saying you managed patient scheduling, you can highlight how you coordinated a high volume scheduling system that really improved efficiency and reduced errors. You also want to use metrics whenever possible to really show the value that you created. And then during the interview, clearly connect your strengths to the role and express that enthusiasm. So I have an example that I kind of want to read as well. So you could say something like, while my background is in a different industry, my experience leading projects and driving measurable results really aligns directly with the goals of this position and company. By emphasizing those transferable skills, those results-oriented examples, and your readiness to contribute, you demonstrate adaptability and really make a strong case for succeeding in a new industry.
Excellent. And like you said, we have so many students who are looking to make a career change, career
Mhm.
pivot. So are some great tips, transferable skills. Desiree, my next question is for you. And I think Nicole touched on this a little bit that this question is coming in through the Q&A. How can we best explain employment gaps, those career changes, or time away from work in a positive way?
Yeah, definitely. And this really is such a common question. I work with so many students who, have this question about employment gaps or career changing. And I'm glad that we're talking about it because almost everyone has something that in their work experience doesn't look perfectly linear. And I think employers really understand that, right? Life happens. People go take care of family. They go back to school. They focus on health. Maybe they moved states or they are just completely rethinking what they want their career to look like. The key to this is to explain the gap or the change briefly, be honest, and do it in a way that focuses on the future. I definitely don't want anyone to overshare or think that you need to apologize for any of those gaps or those changes. And I really do have a lot of students who come to me concerned about those employment gaps. So I just want to emphasize something. Please don't discount the experience that you gained during that time, even if it wasn't a paid job. Things like coursework can absolutely count, especially if you completed projects, maybe you learned a new tool or practiced industry concepts. There's also volunteering or caregiving, internships, maybe there's military experience or community involvement. All of these things build real marketable skills. And experience does not only come from a paycheck. So I think when you start thinking about your experience in that way, it becomes a lot easier to explain away the gaps because they're not really gaps in that sense. And then for career changers, Nicole touched on a lot of it, but I think it's important to think of your answer to that as a growth story. Show the connection between what you've done, where you're going. And again, this is where the transferable skills really shine. There's all those skills that she mentioned: communication, problem solving, customer service, leadership. Like, there's so much out there and they carry over into every industry. So, highlighting those skills really helps employers see the value you're bringing with you. I think at the end of the day, employers really just want reassurance that you're prepared, you're committed, and you're ready to step into the role that you're interviewing for. So just make sure to keep your tone confident, positive, forward thinking, and I think your explanation will land really well. And that's also something that we can practice together as we do mock interviews, right? Learning how to highlight those skills that you've gained during these gaps or in the previous career. So we definitely love to work with students on that.
Great tips, Desiree. Thank you so much. That using, like you said, it's not a paycheck doesn't mean you didn't gain experience. Great point. Nicole, what are employers really listening for when they ask about that strengths and weaknesses question?
Oh gosh, another great question that we hear all the time from students. And this is actually something too when in my days as recruiter, it's kind of fun for me to reminisce on this. When employers and recruiters are really asking about the dreaded strengths and weakness question, they're really just trying to assess your self-awareness, your honesty, and your fit for the role, not just your technical skills. And I'm often finding myself too when I'm talking to students, especially about like that weakness question, there's that negative connotation that tends to be associated with it. So you have to spin it in a positive way. So I'm going to touch on that here in a minute. I want to first of all talk about the strengths part, and then we can kind of piggyback over into the weakness question. So for strengths, what recruiters are really wanting to hear are relevant skills. I know we talked a lot about that, but you really want to choose those strengths that you have that align with the job itself. So, for example, if it's a team-based role, you want to emphasize collaboration or leadership or how you take the initiative. You also want to highlight the impact. So, back up your strengths with those results. We've talked a little bit about this already, but instead of saying something like, I'm organized, you can say, I'm organized and I developed a tracking system that reduced project delays by 25%. You showcase your strength, but then you back it up with a tangible outcome and a tangible story. And then be authentic. You want to be genuine. You want to choose strengths that you consistently demonstrate rather than trying to impress. Now let's circle back over to that weakness part. And, I love to say circle back. So we're going to circle back to weaknesses. But when recruiters are actively having conversations with potential candidates and they're looking for answers to that weakness question, they're looking for self-awareness. So acknowledging areas for growth, honestly and thoughtfully, but then also showcasing that you have a growth mindset. Nobody's perfect. There's always room for growth, and you want to show how you're always wanting to improve yourself. So, for example, you could say, I used to take on too many projects at once, but I've learned to prioritize and delegate more effectively. The other thing, too, that employers are looking for with the weakness question is reassurance. So, choose a weakness that really won't directly interfere with success in the role. And then another key tip that I'm always trying to talk to students about with this is you want to turn those weaknesses into a story of learning and progress. And I don't even like to think of it as like, what's your weakness? Reframe that in your mind so it's a mindset shift to saying, what's your area of growth? What's something that you're continuously trying to improve upon? And another thing too with this, area for growth, avoid overused answers like, I'm a perfectionist, unless you can really describe concrete steps that you've taken to manage it. Ultimately, with the strengths and weaknesses question, employers aren't looking for perfection. They're listening for self-awareness, accountability, and alignment between your strengths, your development areas, and the needs of the position itself. And another thing too, just as it relates to interviewing is, yes, you're sitting in an interview and you have somebody asking you a question and you're giving an answer, but at the end of the day, an interview is a conversation between two people or a couple people. And that's why it's so important to really showcase your genuine, authentic self.
Not just great advice for an interview, but great advice for life. You can always switch that. weaknesses to areas of growth. Love that. Well, here's another good question, Desiree. What types of questions should we ask the interviewer at the end of an interview? And should we ask questions?
Yes, and asking questions at the end of an interview is such an important part of the process. Like Nicole said, it's a conversation. And in my opinion, some of the most valuable and fruitful parts of the conversation happens at the end when you are asking those questions. So you never want to end with saying, I have no questions. This is really your moment to shift from interviewee to potential team member and really understand what the job and the workplace are like. Employers want to see that you're engaged, thoughtful, and you're truly considering how
Mhm.
you would fit in and contribute. So I always tell students to focus on questions that help you understand things like expectations, culture, the day-to-day reality of the role. The good questions show that you're not just looking for any job, but you're really looking for the right fit where you can grow and succeed. So there's different areas you can ask for questions on, but I think one area that you can start with is asking about what the employer expects from someone in the role. So for example, you might say, what are your top priorities in this role in the first 30 to 90 days? Or maybe something like, what does success look like in this position? These kinds of questions show that you're already thinking ahead and planning how to deliver value. Another area that you can explore is the team and the leadership style. So, how would you describe the team's working or communication style? Questions like these really help you understand whether the environment will support your best work. Then there's also questions about current challenges or opportunities that the team is working through. So, some examples might be, what are some challenges the team is currently facing? Or are there opportunities for professional development or cross training? These type of questions show curiosity, initiative, and then also willingness to grow. And then I always recommend asking something to help you understand the company's culture and values. So you could say, how would you describe the company culture? Or what qualities help people thrive here? And this helps you get a really good feel for whether your values align with theirs. And then this is what I call the magic question. And it's honestly a brave one to ask, but it's incredibly helpful. So you can ask, is there anything about my background or experience that gives you concerns about my ability to succeed in the role? And it's honestly tough to ask because you're inviting that feedback in real time, but it is powerful. If the interviewer does have any concerns, maybe it's about a skills gap or something you mentioned earlier in the interview, asking it during the interview gives you the opportunity to address it right away instead of letting it linger after the interview. So, either way, make sure that you have that list of questions ready to go to ask the employer at the end of the interview to show that you really are interested and engaged.
Great examples. I would recommend listening to this recording and writing a lot of these down. These are great questions. And even Amber in the chat posed one. What does a day in this role look like? Another great question.
Mhm.
Nicole, I'm going to toss it over to you. How should we follow up after an interview? And what should I
Mhm.
say in that thank you email?
I love this question because a lot of times, when I'm talking to students, sometimes they don't realize that there is a lot of value with that follow-up. When I was doing recruiting, I always kind of like to just give a little bit of perspective. I would be interviewing hundreds of candidates per week, and sometimes the difference maker was that thank you note. So following up after an interview, really, it's a small step that can make a huge impact. And so a concise thank you email that shows professionalism, that enthusiasm that we've been talking about, and attention to detail will really could go far in the selection process. I also encourage students when you are sending a thank you email, you want to send it within 24 hours to stay top of mind. Now, I get that sometimes when you are going through the selection process, you might be in conversation with the HR manager, you might be in conversation with the scheduler. So if you don't have the direct contact information for the recruiters themselves, you can always type up the thank you email, send it over to the person that you're in contact with, and then have them share it on your behalf. So how do you structure your thank you message? So you want to express gratitude. You want to thank the interviewer for their time and the opportunity to learn about the role itself. And then also take this as an opportunity to reinforce your fit for the position. Reference one or two strengths or topics discussed that really align with the position and add a personal touch. So maybe mention a specific detail from the conversation to show genuine engagement. And then you want to close politely. So reaffirming your appreciation and interest in the next steps. Another tip when you're kind of thinking about what to say with the thank you note is you want to keep it brief. Proofread carefully and then send personalized notes for each interviewer as well, because sometimes you might be interviewing with two or three individuals. In my experience as a corporate recruiter managing the full hiring cycle, like I said before, I often saw how thoughtful thank you messages really set candidates apart and sometimes becoming the deciding factor when qualifications with candidates were similar. So, a well crafted thank you email really reinforces your enthusiasm, it highlights your fit for the role, and it helps you to leave a memorable impression.
Great advice and such great perspective. These recruiters, interviewers are interviewing hundreds sometimes, so any little thing you can do to stand out really makes a difference.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, this was the end of the questions that Desiree and Nicole curated based on what they're hearing in their coaching calls, what they've experienced in their professional journey. But we had some great questions come in from our Hope and Hustle community. So if you're not a part of that, we encourage you to join. If you like this interaction, if you like talking to your peers about the job search, log into UAGC Connect. We have a community there for you called Hope and Hustle. So some of these questions have come in through that as well. So Desiree, I'm going to pose the first one to you. What if the employer asked me about salary expectations in the first interview? Well, that's tough. Even though I didn't bring it up, what should I do?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And, going back to, questions you should ask in the interview, um, maybe some questions you don't necessarily want to ask are related to like salary or scheduling or time off right away. But sometimes the employer asks you, right? And so that's what this question is ultimately getting at. So, how do you answer this if the employer's bringing it up, but you're not bringing it up? And I think that this is where research really matters, right? So before your interview, you'll want to look up the typical salary range for that role in your area or industry. You can use tools out there. There's tons of them. There's like Bureau of Labor Statistics. I like Glassdoor a lot, salary.com, pay scale, and even using job descriptions from similar positions or companies. And that will give you a sense of what's competitive and realistic. And so you'll want to come into the interview with that research in your back pocket because that will give you a lot more confidence if something like this does get asked. And in this case, you're not guessing, right? You're speaking from actual market data. So if the employer asks, instead of giving one specific number, you can give a well-researched range. So maybe something like, based on my research and the responsibilities of this role, I'm looking for something between the range of, A and B. And so giving that range shows that you're flexible but still informed. And so if you truly don't feel ready to give a number yet, maybe you need more information about the role, you can also say something like, I'd love to learn a little bit more about the full scope of the responsibilities before sharing a number, but I'm aiming for something that's competitive for this role and aligned with the market data. And so both approaches are really professional and completely acceptable. But I think it's also important to remember that compensation is so much more than just the salary. Once you get to the later stages of the hiring process, and also once you're working with the recruiter, things like benefits, schedule, location, maybe there's bonuses or the holiday time off, or even growth opportunities. All of those things factor into the full package. But for that first conversation, giving that range based on research is perfectly appropriate.
Great tips, Desiree. That's such a tough one to answer. So thank you. Nicole, the next
Mhm.
tough question. How can we effectively answer why should we hire you?
Oh, another great question, and probably one that gets asked in most interviews for sure. So, when you get the question, why should we hire you? I like to tell students to think of it as your moment to really bring everything together, right? Bring your skills, your mindset, and the real value you bring to the team. So, it's really not just about repeating your resume. That is a mistake that I often see a lot of students make. They think, oh my gosh, I got to just repeat my resume. Don't do that. It's really more so about showing how you work and then how you solve problems. And then, like what we were talking about before, how you'll fit into their culture. So, you really want to go beyond your resume. You want to share how you work, not just what you've done. So an example of that could be, I thrive in collaborative environments and love using data to solve problems. You also want to speak to their needs. You want to identify what the role is trying to fix and then position yourself as the solution. So an example of this could be, this role really focuses in on streamlining processes. And at my last job, I built a system that cut onboarding time by 20%. The other thing with this question is you want to show adaptability. Employers want fast learners. And so, an example of how you could say something like that is, I quickly learned a new project tool and even trained the team so we could stay on track. Another thing, too, is to tell a quick story, not a list. So, you want to tie your strengths and examples together so you're memorable. You probably are seeing my German Shepherd in the back because she is very passionate about this question as well. And she hears me talk about it a lot with my students every day. The other thing too is balancing that confidence with humility. So, an example of how to do this is you can say, I bring strong analytical skills and I'm excited to grow with your team. Got another formula for you, Rebecca. I know you love this. So, you want to lead with your strengths, give a quick example, and then connect it to their needs, and then finish with a mindset statement. So, this question is really your chance to show them not only that you're qualified for this role that you're interviewing for, but that you're self aware, that you're adaptable, and that you're really someone they'll genuinely want to have on their team.
A mindset statement. I love that. I love that. Thank you. Um, One of the questions that came in, and I think a lot of people are probably feeling this way. I know in my experience, I feel this way, even though my job had been to train others to interview. So the question is, I always feel nervous when I have an interview. How can I feel confident when going into that interview?
I'm so glad we're talking about confidence because honestly,
Mhm.
confidence is one of the biggest elements in succeeding in an interview. You can have all the skills in the world, but if you do not show up confidently, the interviewer might not be able to fully see your strengths. And I also want to start out by reminding you that you already bring so much to the table between your education, your work experiences, your life experiences, and everything that you've had to overcome along the way. You really have every reason to feel capable and prepared. But I think confidence isn't just about the mindset. A huge part of that confidence is going to come from preparation. And I think this is the piece that makes the biggest difference for most job seekers. So, practicing your answers ahead of time and preparing for those common questions and using the star method, that's a great start. And I think another part of building that confidence is knowing the organization you're interviewing with. Doing some research on their mission, their values, and what they do just helps you feel more grounded and confident. And along with that, take another look at that job description so you really understand the responsibilities and can clearly connect your skills to the job you're interviewing for. And I think something else that people overthink in this is being familiar with your own resume. Make
Mhm.
sure you're comfortable talking about anything that you've listed. When you know your story well, what you've done, what you've learned, and how those experiences have prepared you, I think you naturally show up more confidently. So, yes, I do think confidence absolutely comes from believing in yourself, and you should believe in yourself because you've earned that. But confidence also comes from doing the prep that helps you walk into that interview feeling ready and proud of what you bring to the table.
I love that. Thank you so much for boosting the confidence of our amazing students and alumni. And it really does sound like that one of the major themes today was preparation is the path to confidence, whether it's
Mhm.
research, knowing your stories, that really is a key to success. So thank you so much. We do have some time to dig into the questions of our live attendees today. So if you'd like to stick around, we will go through some of the questions. We won't have time to touch on every question, and some questions are very specific to you as an individual. And so in those cases, if your question is not answered, we really want to answer it by Desiree, Nicole, or our other career advisor. And so if your question isn't answered, please email us at careerservices@uagc.edu, and we'll drop that in the chat. You can also log into Handshake through your student portal to schedule an appointment with your assigned career advisor, and they can really dig into your specific question. So I'll pull out some of these questions. I saw one just pop through just now in the chat, and this happens. Irma asks, how do you overcome the feeling when you suddenly go blank in the middle of an interview?
That's a good question.
I think this is a good one, and
Mhm.
I think it's okay. I think we're all human,
Yes.
right? We don't always have all of these answers prepared. I think it's perfectly appropriate to say, I need a moment to think about that, or to pause, right? Obviously, you don't want to be silent, staring into space for 2 minutes, but it's natural to pause and to collect your thoughts. And for
Mhm.
me, I've been on both sides of the interview table, obviously, but it's really nice when someone does take the time or say that they need a moment to gather their thoughts because I can tell that they're being really thoughtful about the answer that they give and they're taking it very seriously. So, I would just say that that's okay. Try not to let it get you flustered. Just
Mhm.
in that moment, if you do need a second, either just take a breath, pause,
Mhm.
let them know you need a moment. And I think that hopefully you're able to recover well and it's perfectly natural.
And the next question that came through, and I think Nicole touched on this, but it's great to reiterate. How soon after the interview do you send the thank you note?
Within 24 hours. Honestly, the sooner the better because you want to stay at the top of their mind, right? You want to stay at the top of the mind of the recruiters because you don't necessarily know how many candidates they might have been interviewing that day. So it's really important to just remind them, hey, I'm here. I'm amazing. Like, you want to bring me back or you want to hire me. So within 24 hours at like the latest is what I definitely recommend to do for sending a thank you note for sure.
Great advice. Sharisa asks in the Q&A, do you have a list of frequently asked questions we can use to prepare for future interviews that can be adjusted to any field?
Yes, we actually have quite a few resources related to interview prep and common interview questions. Um, for this, I would actually recommend the resources listed in your individual degree pathway,
Mhm.
and that will vary depending on what program you're in. So, if anyone wants those questions, we can also send you the direct link to your pathway with the whole section on interviewing with all of the resources. So I would just say for that, also email us at careerservices@uagc.edu, and then we can give you some really individualized resources as well.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Destiny asks, what common mistakes do candidates make in virtual interviews, and how can I avoid them?
So I will take this one, Des. Feel free to hop in as well. With virtual interviews, it can almost be more distracting than in-person interviews, right? Like you're in your home, you might have a German Shepherd that makes an appearance, And so it's important to, I would say, find a space for yourself that is calming to you. It helps to ease your anxiety. There is a distraction-free zone, if you will. You don't have a background that's kind of cluttered. It's professional. Also, with work, like with a virtual interview, it's hard because a lot of times too, sometimes the recordings like that, I think it's like sometimes what employers will do is they'll do like an actual recording of the first round interview. So you're not even talking to somebody else, you're just talking to yourself. So that can kind of be awkward as well. So I would also say treat the camera almost like it's like a person. Like look at the camera and pretend that that's somebody else's eyes and that's how you're making eye contact. It sounds silly, but it makes a huge difference. And you're not just looking at yourself talking in the screen. It allows for you to really be present and engaged in the conversation. If you talk with your hands, like Des and I both do, we were just joking around about this before. A good rule of thumb too to kind of keep it distraction free is just hold your hand placement gently on the desk. Feel free to talk with your hands. Kind of picture there's like a little box in front of you and don't go outside of that box. But the other thing that's great about a virtual interview is you can also have your resume in front of you. So feel free to print up your resume. Feel free to print up the job description in front of you and you can have a highlighter. I tell students this too. Highlight a couple things that you don't want to forget to talk about on your resume or on the job description as well. And that can help alleviate some distractions and can kind of help you to keep your mind calm and present during virtual interviews. I don't know, Des, if you have anything else you want to add as well.
No, I think that that is great. I think that one challenge I see, it goes with, you having that resume right there. Being in a virtual space, right, makes it easier for us to
Mhm.
have those notes and things right there. available to us. But I also want to caution students on don't just, have all your STAR method
Right.
worksheet pulled up and just read off of the page, right? Like if you still have those resources that you're using because it's a virtual space and it allows for that, still make sure, like Nicole said, that you are present. It's like talking to a person because you definitely don't want to be, looking off to the side, obviously
Right.
reading notes. And then I kind of touched on it earlier with, obviously in virtual interviews, you still want to dress professionally. And it connects with a lot of what Nicole said too, but just making sure that you do have a clear space to work in. And I think along with that is before the interview, also give yourself time to regroup. It's going to be really hard if you're rushing in the door 2 minutes before you have your virtual interview because things are different
Mhm.
when we're at home. We don't have the commute to the office and the time to wait in the waiting room for, the interviewers. We might just be, taking care of children and then turning to the interview. So if you can, try to give yourself some space also before the interview to kind of center yourself and, get ready for what is to come virtually.
Great virtual tips because that is the reality. The reality, I feel like 5 years ago we talked about the future of interviewing is virtual, and it is here. It is. Most
Mhm.
people will have a virtual interview. So thank you. Another great question that came in through the Q&A was for those of us that have tattoos and piercings, how would you advise we show up to the interview with piercings removed, tattoos covered up? But what if covering up your tattoos isn't ideal for the weather? So what's some advice you would give a student in this situation?
I feel like I can answer this one mainly because I am the one with the tattoos and the piercings, and I understand what that is like in the workplace. Obviously, I work in career services, so I lean a little bit more conservative in those professional spaces. Yes, I would always recommend removing those piercings, especially if they are, facial piercings and pretty prominent. And then also tattoos, I personally recommend covering those up. And the main reason isn't because you should be ashamed, especially if, a lot of companies do allow that with their employees. I think the main reason is you don't want anything to distract from your message, right? Like when I go into an interview, I want people to hear me and the skills that I bring to the table, and I don't want them to be distracted by anything I have going on. And I think that also goes along with not just tattoos and piercings, but maybe like extreme jewelry or, sometimes if you have bracelets that make a lot of noise, you don't want anything to distract from your message and what you bring to the table. And then as far as the long sleeve thing, I mean, typically interviews are indoors, right? So I wouldn't let that part bother you as much. But I would also look into the company culture and just see like, is this
Mhm.
something that's common? In this day and age, a lot more organizations are more open to people with tattoos and piercings. So at that point, it might be more of like a personal preference of how you want to show up. But again, this is also where research is key, right? Know the
Mhm.
company that you're interviewing with, because in some companies, it might be appropriate to cover that up on the job.
Thank you so much. And I do want to take a moment to shout out Destiny in the chat who has an interview today. So good luck,
Yay!
Destiny.
Good
You
luck,
got this.
Destiny.
Yes.
Please follow up with us in Hope and Hustle or email us at Career
Mhm.
Services. We really want to hear how it goes.
Yes, we're sending positive vibes your way.
Yes. So we just have room for maybe that one or two questions, see what we can squeeze in. This question we did cover in the webinar, but I think it's good to go back to touch on again. So what are some of those examples again of high quality questions to ask at the end of an interview?
I can go ahead and take this one. I know Des covered this during the webinar, but I definitely think it goes back to doing the research on yourself and on the company as well. But asking, what is the day of, somebody in like a financial analyst role look like? What does a typical day in the life look like? What's the company culture look like? And we'd be happy to share those interview questions to ask at the end of an interview as well. If you reach out to us at careerservices.edu or careerservices at uagc.edu. I would also say too, you can always ask them. I actually had a question asked when I was doing recruiting, and they said, why did you get into this industry? What do you like about working at this company as well? And that way it also keeps it conversational too. And it also shows them that you're wanting to invest in, who they are. And if they do potentially become your boss or your coworker, you're establishing that relationship right away. And it showcases that you are establishing a relationship. And that's a transferable skill that you have as well too. But I know Des had a ton that she covered as well during that webinar. So we'll absolutely share those with you as well too.
Thank you, Nicole.
Hmm.
Oh, so many good questions in the chat. It's going to be hard to wrap up and keep us on time, but um, okay, we'll finish with two. I promise. This is the last two. Um, this student said, or alumni said, they talk about knowing your audience is always important, doing that research. How do you sit in an interview when you're either overqualified or when the interviewers have less experience than you? How do you approach that interview?
That is a wonderful question. And first off, I just want to say I actually probably invite this student to have a coaching appointment with one of
Yeah.
us, whoever it might be. But I mean, and maybe I should let Nicole actually say something about this, but my first question is also, why are you in that interview specifically?
Mhm.
Like, if you know you're overqualified and especially, have more experience than maybe the people you're interviewing with, it is hard to kind of dampen your experience sometimes when you're trying to share like how wonderful you are and what you bring to the table. So I'm not to say that there's not a way to answer that tactfully, but I also
Mhm.
have additional questions to ask. And I know there's probably um, a more official way to say this, but I would just love to have a coaching appointment because I think there's a lot we
Yeah.
can dig into there.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's right.
I will just kind of piggyback off of that as well. I have a lot of questions too. I mean, we're both just, I can see the wheels turning, like we want to have that coaching call. I would say too, and I tell students this with regards to whatever experience level you're at, where you're at in the interview process, you get brought in for an interview. They see your resume. They know they see your cover letter. They see your why, if you're articulating it correctly, like on your cover letter, on your application materials, what your why is when you're going to the interview. So they're probably expecting that maybe you are overqualified for this specific role, but maybe it's because you're making a career change. Maybe you went and you've been in corporate for 20 years and you're wanting to pivot into a nonprofit sector, for example, and you are excited about leveraging a new skill that you got or new certification that you got. You maybe went and got a master's degree that's relevant to nonprofit that you really want to kind of make a career out of. As long as you're emphasizing that on the application materials, they should kind of have that as a precursor going into the conversation itself. So that way they have an understanding as to, yeah, this person is really overqualified for certain opportunities, but maybe they have some of those transferable skills that's why they're wanting to make a career change. But I definitely think this would be something that we could dive into in a coaching call for sure. Hopefully that makes
Excellent. Excellent tips. So final question. I saw this theme come through a few questions, so you'll probably be answering it for a few people. You touched on this earlier about, you can have experience with unpaid positions. And so maybe you can re-emphasize and go over what that looks like. How can you gain experience to highlight and have those stories to share in an interview, if you don't have that experience yet? So what are some ways you can get experience?
There's a lot of great ways. And Des, I'll give you some time to answer this, but immediately, like, I just think of we've been talking a lot about the future of work on our team here and upskilling, getting micro credentials. So, any kind of way that you can get some tangible skills, whether it's through, Allison.com, Forage. We have a whole resource on this as well that we'd be happy to share with you that you can kind of bridge the gap between one industry to the next. That really helps you to get those tangible skills is a really great way for you to gain that experience. Another thing too is to get internships. I have a lot of students as well who are, I've been in, healthcare, but I'm kind of interested in kind of transitioning over into the finance side of healthcare. What's a good way for me to kind of segue into that? So what I like to tell students, for example, is, maybe look into an internship. It's basically you're test driving out a career before you're investing in it, in a full-time job. But you're getting that experience, you're building up your resume, you're highlighting those transferable skills from those experiences, those micro credentials, what any kind of upskilling opportunity that you could pursue. But I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add to that as well, Des.
I mean, that's perfect. I think just one thing I'll add is like so many students forget that what they're doing in school is such a great
Mm-hmm.
way to gain that experience.
Totally.
Like I said earlier, like maybe it's a project. Maybe again, like Nicole said, it's an internship. I have a lot of students who, they volunteer. Maybe it's at their children's school or whatever they do, but it helps them cultivate these transferable skills that we talk about. So I don't think the big thing is like people get lost in the fact that I haven't done this exact role, but it's not so much
Mhm.
about have you done this role, but have you utilized the skills that this role requires, even if it's in a different space, right? And that's where I love to invite students to meet with us also because that's what we
Mhm.
can help you figure out is like, okay, what have you, done, whether it's not related to a paycheck, is there that volunteer
Yeah.
experience, those projects, that certification, whatever it might be, and how do you translate that into your interview and help you market yourself by using that type of experience. So there's tons of ways, and that's where we get really excited as coaches is working with students and helping you uncover like, hey, we're not reinventing the wheel here for you. Like we're just helping you point out all this awesome experience that you already have.
Right. Absolutely, guys.
Yes. And shout out to Dorothy in the chat, Champ's mentor. Being a Champ's
Yes.
mentor
Yes.
here at the university, being
Absolutely.
involved in student government here, those are great ways to build your skill set. Great. Thank you so
100%.
much. Love the engagement today. Unfortunately, we are at time. So if you want to connect directly with your career advisor for a mock interview to practice everything you learned today, or really to dive into your specific situation, like Desiree and Nicole talked about, please, you can log into Handshake through your student portal to schedule an appointment. Or I know it's been dropped in the chat, career services at uagc.edu. Also, I mentioned it earlier, but if you are interested in continuing to engage with your fellow UAGC students and community, we encourage you to join the Hope and Hustle community in UAGC Connect. We have one more career services event as we wrap up the end of the year. Next Wednesday, December 10th, we will have an employer information session with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Great way to end the year here in career services. We can't wait to see you there. You can register through Handshake or again, email us and we'll send you the registration link if you haven't done so. And finally, you're hearing it here. Save the date for Wednesday, March 25th for our annual UAGC Career Fair. This is where you will have the opportunity to connect with several employers in several industries in one-on-one or group sessions. So please keep an eye out for Handshake, UAGC Connect, your email. We will open registration for that in the new year. And as a reminder, you will receive a follow-up email with a link to this recording as well as the STAR method worksheet for you to start practicing with. If you have any final questions for career services on your resume, your cover letter, job search, obviously interviewing, please email us or again log into Handshake through your student portal. We've got a ton of resources in there that you can access 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Before you leave, there will be a brief confidential survey that will appear when the session finishes. Your feedback helps us improve and plan for our future events. And I just want to say thank you to Desiree and Nicole today for their amazing and insightful session today. They added so much value and I think really built all our confidence stepping into our next interview. And just want to thank all of you in attendance today for being so engaging. Happy holidays. We'll see you next week.